Ford just exposed the new 5.0. The 2026 numbers change everything. You know that feeling when a spec sheet looks exactly the same, but the truck drives different? On paper, the 2026 5.0 doesn't look like a revolution. Ford's still calling it a 5.0-liter V8, still quoting 400 horsepower and 410 pound-feet of torque in the F-150. If you just glance at the numbers, you think, same old Coyote. EcoBoost still runs the show. Nothing to see here. Ford just exposed that assumption as completely wrong. Because the big news for 2026 isn't a flashy new displacement. It's where that torque shows up, how it's delivered, and what it does to your real 5-year cost when you pick V8 instead of the boosty V6. Ford quietly fixed the 3 things that kept a lot of people from checking the 5.0 box: mid-range pull, fuel math, and long-term ownership anxiety. The villain on the table before we go any further. The villain is peak number thinking. For a decade, Ford and the marketing machine trained you to think like this: peak horsepower, peak torque, peak tow rating, highest number wins. That's how the EcoBoost V6 took over. It looked unbeatable on a brochure. 400 horsepower, 500 pound-feet, tow ratings up to 13,000 plus, and good miles per gallon on the window sticker. The 5.0 kept getting squeezed into for the old-school guys who like noise. 2026 is the year Ford basically admits that was the wrong war. The new 5.0 is aimed at area under the curve, how much usable torque you have in the 2,000 to 3,500 RPM band where trucks actually live, and what that does to your transmission, your fuel, and your resale. Let's break down exactly what changed, and then we'll do the thing nobody in marketing wants to do: 5-year math. What the new 5.0 actually is. Ford isn't throwing the Coyote away. They've doubled down on it, both in the Mustang and in the F-150. 2026 F-150 still lists the 5.0 V8 at 400 horsepower/410 pound-feet, with Ford and dealers quietly emphasizing refined torque delivery and fuel efficiency upgrades. Translated into truck language, that means the torque curve is fatter in the mid-range, not just a spike up top. The calibration is rethought so it doesn't lug for fake MPG, then dump fuel to save parts. Thermal and timing control got cleaned up so it can run closer to its efficiency sweet spot in the real world. On the Mustang side, the same basic 5.0 architecture is now doing up to 486 horsepower in GT and 500 horsepower in Dark Horse trims, with updated internals and cooling. That tells you Ford is still pouring R&D into this engine instead of letting it die. So in the truck, think of the 2026 5.0 as same peak numbers you're used to, but more torque where you tow, and a control strategy that stops fighting itself. Now, let's compare it to the engine Ford's been pushing instead of talking about this too loudly: the 3.5 EcoBoost. 5.0 versus 3.5 EcoBoost, the 2026 numbers that matter. Strip the marketing off and look at the lineup Ford and the dealers are already publishing for 2026 F-150 5.0 V8, 400 horsepower/410 pound-feet. 3.5 EcoBoost V6, 400 horsepower/500 pound-feet. 3.5 PowerBoost Hybrid, 430 horsepower/570 pound-feet, with big range claims. If you stare only at those 3 lines, EcoBoost wins. Same horsepower, way more torque, better headline tow number. But Ford just exposed what happens when you actually drive and own them. 1. Torque curve versus spike. The EcoBoost makes big torque early, but it leans on boost and enrichment to keep things cool when you're pulling a grade. That means your real-world miles per gallon tanks when you're actually using it, and your oil lives a harder life. The 5.0's new curve is built to give honest torque in the 2,000 to 3,500 band without as many dump fuel moments. You don't get the same peak twist on paper, but you get something more valuable: predictable pull and less drama when you're towing 6 to 8K. 2. Fuel economy in the real world. Check the preview numbers dealers and early spec sheets are using. A 2026 F-150 5.0 is being quoted around 16 city/24 highway, where a 3.5 EcoBoost sits near 16 to 17 city/24 to 25 highway depending on trim and axle. So, on the sticker, EcoBoost wins by maybe 1 mile per gallon. In real towing use, as owners have already seen in earlier years, it's often a wash, or the V8 quietly matches or beats it because it doesn't live in enrichment as much. 3. Complexity versus abuse tolerance. EcoBoost, turbos, intercoolers, more plumbing, more heat management, and a calibration that works overtime to keep knock and temps under control. 5.0, high compression, yes, but no turbos, less plumbing, and a simpler thermal picture. It still cares about oil and cooling, but it doesn't have the same boost plus heat stack. Now, put those differences into a 5-year ownership frame at 15,000 miles per year and $3.75 a gallon. If a 3.5 EcoBoost actually returns 18 miles per gallon combined in your life, that's approximately 833 gallons per year, $3,125 per year, $15,625 over 5 years. If a 5.0 returns 17 miles per gallon combined in the same life, that's approximately 882 gallons per year, $3,308 per year, $16,540 over 5 years. That's a $900 to $1,000 fuel gap over 5 years. If the EcoBoost actually maintains that advantage in your use and doesn't constantly dip into boost. Now add complexity. EcoBoost owners see more intercooler, condensation, hot side, and PCV drama when maintenance or use isn't perfect. 5.0 owners see a more traditional set of issues: timing chain/phaser care if you abuse oil intervals, exhaust leaks on high heat trucks, but fewer turbo-specific surprises. Ford knows this. The new 5.0 calibration and torque focus are about making that trade land in the V8's favor again. Quick pause here. If you like having this stuff broken down with actual 5-year math instead of dealer fairy tales, hit subscribe so you don't find out about the next engine trick from a $3,000 invoice. All right, back to it. How the 2026 5.0 changes the F-150 decision, not just the Mustang one. For years, the 5.0 was the heart pick, and EcoBoost was the brain pick. 2026 blurs that. Ford is positioning the refreshed 5.0 in the F-150 as the traditional V8 option for people who tow and keep trucks long-term, with refined torque delivery and fuel efficiency tweaks, so it's not a charity case on the spreadsheet. In practice, that means 1. The 10-speed finally likes it. Earlier, 5.0 plus 10-speed combos could feel like the trans was tuned for EcoBoost and just copied over. Hunting gears, lugging at low RPM, random 1 to 2 weirdness. The 2026 shift logic is built around the updated torque map, so it can hold fewer, more appropriate gears when you're towing, downshift preemptively on grades instead of panic dropping when speed falls, stay locked up more, which helps heat and tow feel. 2 realities versus brochure fiction. The upgraded 5.0 isn't going to suddenly match EcoBoost's biggest tow number, but the question you actually care about is, can I pull 6,000 to 9,000 without the truck or trans feeling like they hate me? With the fatter mid-range and friendlier 10-speed behavior, the 5.0's answer is much closer to yes for most buyers. And because the engine is naturally aspirated, you're not stacking turbo heat on top of trans heat every time you climb. 3. Long-term, the 5.0 becomes the set and forget again, if you respect it. Ford's own messaging on the Mustang side, offering 486 horsepower in GT and 500 horsepower in Dark Horse from the same 5.0 block with stronger internals, shows you how much headroom they've built into this architecture. When they detune it back to 400 horsepower in the truck, that's not because they're lazy. That's because they want lower specific stress per horsepower, easier thermal management under tow, more room for knock control and timing in garbage heat and fuel. So you're effectively getting a truck-detuned version of a 500 horsepower capable engine that's been through the ringer on the performance side. The 2026 5.0 buyer's playbook. Let's turn this into actual decisions, not just theory. You pick the 5.0 in 2026 if you plan to keep the truck 8 to 10 years. You tow in the 6,000 to 9,000 range, not max tow every weekend. You value simpler, NA engine architecture over maximum headline torque. You're willing to do oil like religion and treat the 10-speed like it's a precision part, not a 4-speed from 2004. You stay with EcoBoost if you tow closer to the upper limit regularly and need that low RPM hit. You're okay with more complexity in exchange for strong torque, and you swap trucks every 3 to 5 years anyway. You want the hybrid, PowerBoost behavior and are fine living in that technology stack. Ford's 2026 numbers change everything in one key way. The 5.0 is no longer the emotional choice that you pay for at the pump and in resale. With the updated torque delivery and efficiency tweaks, you're talking about a real-world fuel gap of maybe 1 mile per gallon if you drive both like an adult. A maintenance and complexity gap that now swings toward the V8 for long-term owners. A resale story where 5.0 V8, no turbos, proper records, is going to be an easy sell when these trucks hit 100,000 plus. The spreadsheet argument that used to kill the 5.0 is gone. Ford's own numbers and packaging for 2026 expose that. How to spec and drive the new 5.0 so it actually wins. Last piece, you can still ruin this engine with bad decisions. Here's the short checklist to actually cash in on what Ford just gave you. Axle ratio. If you're towing, don't cheap out. Get the tow-friendly axle so the 5.0 sits in its sweet spot instead of lugging. Oil interval, 5,000 miles, not 10,000 if you tow or see a lot of heat. Chains and phasers, love clean oil. Cooling stack. Keep the radiator/intercooler/AC stack clean from the backside. Less heat equals fewer timing pulls equals better MPG. Tow haul. Use it whenever you're pulling, even if you think the load is light. Let the 10-speed use the new calibration the way Ford designed it. Tires, shocks, gears. If you go to 35s without a re-gear, you just undid half of what makes the new 5.0 feel right. Be honest about what you're asking from it. Do that, and the 5.0 becomes what it should have been since day one. The default choice for truck guys who want to live past the warranty without playing turbo roulette. Ignore it, and you'll be the guy saying, "I heard the new 5.0 isn't that different," while you pay for brakes and 10-speed band-aids that had nothing to do with the engine and everything to do with how the truck was spec'd and driven. Ford didn't redesign the 5.0 for 2026 to sell a nostalgia story. They did it because the numbers finally favor the V8 again when you look at torque where you live, fuel over 5 years, and complexity you actually own. Peak horsepower didn't change. Everything that matters did.